Hey, Wendy, just a quick note before this video gets started to let you know that this is a recording of Sabine's amazing workshop, Tapping into Your Power. And because it's a workshop, she's going to pause at several points to sort of allow you to go and complete some exercises. So we've got a helpful worksheet that you can find downloadable down in the description that you should follow along with to help you do some of the exercises. So make sure you look out for that and grab it and download. And one more note before I hand it over to Sabine. This week workshop is a fun little pun. It features something called tapping or emotional freedom technique as a way to help you sort of surface and process emotions around your experiences with power in your life. So a couple things we want you to know. One, tapping is generally speaking well tolerated and very safe for most people. But if you're somebody who comes to this video with a little bit of trauma on board or some emotions that are particularly tight to or close to the surface, we want to make sure that you take extra care. So while you're doing the tapping, if at any point it feels too much, overwhelming, or if you know, kind of based on your own history, going to therapy or working on trauma or anything like that, that this might be a little bit much for you, then we encourage you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, including stepping away, including not doing this exercises entirely, and getting what you can out of the rest of the workshop. Basically, what we're saying is we trust you. We know that you'll do what you can to take care of your body. And for those of you who are sitting there going, oh my God, this is the most terrifying video. How do I click X on YouTube? Don't worry. This is a trigger warning for those who need it and a content warning for those who need it. If you don't feel like this applies to you, don't stress. You're going to have a great time. I hope you enjoyed listening to me. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like an honorary WIMDI member, so thank you for having me. So full name is Sabine Gedeon. I serve in many capacities, but mostly as an executive coach, a leadership development consultant, speaker, author, and a couple other things. My background is actually in human resources. I came into corporate, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I was going to climb the corporate ladder until I wasn't. And so I've been doing this for almost the last 6 years, working with men and women. But of course, I enjoy working with women and helping them navigate not just careers, but life in general. And so as we're discussing what is power, right, before we get into the place where we're talking about empowerment and how to gain your power, it's very important for us to take a step back and define what power is, how we relate to it. And so the reason why we're doing this, Holly and I were talking as we were preparing for this, and this was stewing for me. This is something that I had been working through both with my clients and even with myself through my own journey. And I got to a place, this is about 3 years ago, where I was in a life transition, and I had to ask myself the question, who am I? And it's a very simple question, right? Who am I? Most of us, we know that answer, or we think we know the answer. And after I got through the whole process of, all of the identities and all of the labels and everything else, there was still a little bit of emptiness. And so I was just like, okay, well, let me start asking my clients. Let me incorporate this as part of the coaching process and ask them. And it was the same process. And so I work with a lot of women one-on-one, and I have some male clients too, but it was the same thing. It was I'm a mom, I'm a dad, I'm, an engineer, I'm this, I'm that. And it was just like, okay, now we got all the identities. What else are you? Oh, well, I'm fun. I'm adventurous. I'm da da da. Like all these characteristics and things. Okay, who are you? And then it was the same thing. We got to the same thing of like, well, I don't know. I don't know. Outside of those roles, outside of those identities, outside of those labels, that's all I got. And it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't a place for judgment. That's where I knew we had hit, well, not rock bottom, but that's where I knew that we were in a good place for a foundation. And so as I'm doing this work, and then I start working with my clients through this, I work with a lot of leaders. And so I started to examine, okay, well, if these leaders are unraveling in terms of understanding who they are, how does that correlate with leadership? And so I did a little bit of deeper digging, and that old adage: "Are leaders made? Are leaders born?" Like, which one is it, right? And then I got to another truth. At least this is my truth: that leadership is not about the title, the role, or anything else, but leadership is an innate characteristic that we all have, right? So, of course, people said they were leaders because they were in a particular position. But if you're tracking with me with the identity, if we're all leaders, why is it that some, AKA men, get to be leaders in a certain way. And us women, we aren't leaders in that same way if we are all truly leaders. And so that's when, a little digging. I use my coaching clients to help support this research, this unfunded research here. And the conversation went into a little bit more beyond, okay, if we're all leaders, we see leadership being demonstrated a certain way. What does that mean? What comes with leadership? And that's when the words such as power, authority, influence, control, those started to come up in the conversation. And so I started to ask, well, what do those mean? Because oftentimes those are used interchangeably, right? And so let's dig a little deeper, right? Call me the thesaurus. That's exactly what I turned into. And so as we dug a little deeper, and I power wouldn't leave me. You just have one of those things, like those moments, power wouldn't leave me. And I was just like, I started having conversations with other women, other, successful women in entrepreneurship or in business. Well, how do you feel about power? And they started getting a variety of different responses around power. Either it was just like, I'm not a fan of power, or I'm not into that, or power seems a little bit more like controlling, right? And so everybody started to share what their experiences were. And there are also women who were just like, well, I did a podcast, actually, a whole podcast series, and I wanted to talk to women about power. And you had a sect of women that were going around it. Well, let's talk about the mental health aspect and how that shows up in power. And I was just like, oh wow, we really have some work to do here when it comes to power. And it almost felt like, similar to talking about money, right? Like you're not going to walk up to anybody and be like, hey, how much money do you make? It started to feel like there was this disconnect between us and how we feel about power. And I know I'm generalizing here. And so as I continue to do the research around power, authority kept coming back, and authority came back. There was more resistance to authority than influence or power. And when I dug into that a little bit, it was like, well, in order to be an effective leader, you need some level of authority. But why is it that we're so inclined, or we're more inclined to move towards influence versus authority as women? And so today I really want to focus on not just breaking that down. I mean, I'm sowing the seeds now because I want you to start to think about, what does power, what does authority, and what does influence mean to you? How do you differentiate the three? Or do you even differentiate the three? And then we're going to dig a little deeper to, how do you feel about it? Because as I'll share, a lot of that foundation and how we feel about these words and how we've seen them model, that didn't start with where we are today. That started much sooner. And so what we're going to do here is really start to look at what is your current paradigm or your current beliefs around those words. And then we're going to do some digging so that if you want to, you get to redefine what power means to you, what authority means to you, what influence means to you, what control in some capacities, because that's another word that has come up. So now think about babies when they're starting to talk. What is the first word? Maybe the first or second word they say, because there's some debate around what the first word is. What is the first word that you typically hear them say? Mama, okay. After mama and dada comes no. Okay. All right. Awesome. So no, this is the one that I'm zoning on, right? No, it's the word that we hear them say often. Think about any 2-year-old who is having a temper tantrum, or even if they're not, right? You're just offering them breakfast or a pink shirt or a blue shirt, right? You will hear them say no incessantly. They love that word. Everything is no. Part of the reason for that is at the age of 2, that's when we're starting to explore power. That's when we're starting to learn to assert our own power. That's why, oftentimes they use that word no, because they get to say no and they get to, command what it is that they want or don't want at the time. And so also, not only is it just them asserting power, but you'll also notice around 2, right? That's when they start walking, right? Or getting into stuff. What happens? Mom sees them going, next to the stair. No, right? And so they hear no, and it's with a frightening jolt or fear, right? Well meaning, but it's that their parents' way of protecting them. Or if they do something, right, you'll hear, no, don't do that. And so that's the word that they're hearing. And now, depending on how severe or how loving that no comes, they start to internalize. We start to internalize what that no means. And we can see that, or we can take in that no to mean like, oh no, like no is a bad thing. Like no is a place for me to be fearful or for me to turn into myself. And then we grow up out of that. We get to 7 to 9, right? 7 to 9 is where we start to explore. We're a little bit more aware of what's going on. We're playing sports. We're in activities. We're noticing what's happening. We're watching the news, or we're listening to the news while our parents are listening to the news. So we're hearing things that are happening, whether it's at the White House or whatever. I remember I used to, back when there were newspapers, I used to read the police blotter in the newsletter. Don't ask me why, right? But like you become aware of what's happening during that age. And then you get to, and of course, obviously, the authority that's taking place when you're in school and you have authority figures outside of your parents at that stage. And then from 12 to 13, that's that next stage where we start playing around with power. And that's where, I love this because Daryl gave this. So shout out to Daryl. That's where we're trying to figure out the who's who in the zoo, right? We're looking at our peer group and we're trying to figure out, okay, who's the leader, right? Like John is, the head of the basketball team. So he's going to be immediately the leader and we're going to be followers. We're observing how that works out in the school structure. We're looking at how that looks in our society. And so this is also a time where you start to assert your authority at home. That's why that 13 age, that teenager, moms and daughters, that they start fighting, boys and dads, right? They start trying to jock for power, if you will, in the home. And then we call the kids rebellious, or we call them, like terrible teenagers, or whatever labels we put on it. But again, that's another state in our development, we're trying to figure out what is our relationship with power. Now we've uncovered your earlier intro or experiences with power. Now we're going to take a look at how it may be showing up, or maybe some of that it's still showing up in this stage of your life. So, historically, many have experienced power through a competitive or more aggressive lens. And we know if we just look at any sect of society today, right, the perception is that when you think of power, we think of, very like masculine, assertive, dominance, unilateral decision making, the patriarchy, if you will, that exists. That's what a lot of us associate with power, or that's basically what we see in our day to day for the most part. And given that, a lot of you have worked in male dominated environments, that, there's the how the men show up and what's allowed and acceptable. And then when women try to show up that way, how oftentimes they are labeled as aggressive or bossy or the other B word. And so, it's this dynamic of, okay, we all have power, right? And we'll talk a little bit about where power is sourced a little later, but if we're all in these positions, if we're all able to express power, if it's something that even at the age of 2, we've been exploring and we've been playing with, it's something that is okay to have. But yet our society, as of today, maybe 100 years from now, it'll be a different conversation. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, but our society today really sees power as being something that is reserved for our male counterparts. Not only that, and this is actually brought up in my room as well, that depending on some of the cultural background that you have, that, the messaging that you get around power, that's influenced and that perception is influenced. And so for some cultures, and so I didn't give this background, but I was born in Haiti, so I'm an immigrant here, and it was very much I grew up in a cultural household, and it was like the women do the chores, the women cook, the women do all the stuff, right? And then the men get to play and not sleep around, sleep all day and do nothing. And so, we are conditioned very much, and again, depending on your cultural background, that you need to be the caretaker, you need to be nurturing, whereas in some other environments that's not the case. And then we look beyond the family ecosystem and we look into the workplace, right? Like we see those power dynamics playing out as well. So when women are the child bearers, oftentimes, right? So they have to leave the workforce. They have to then figure out, at 11 or 12 weeks, so here in the US, 11 or 12 weeks, right? Like, how am I going to manage this newborn and, take care of all my employees and be able to rise up in the career? And then that double bind, or that standard that we have as women in terms of what, when we do get power in, or when we are allowed to demonstrate power, and I mean that we're actually sitting in positions of power, it's okay for you to have a position of power, right? That subtext, it's okay for you to have a position of power, but you have to be feminine with it, right? You can't be aggressive, you can't be direct, right? And so there's all these messages that we've picked up when we've stepped into the workforce, and even in school too, college, we had some of those messages, but certainly all of these things are being reinforced when we get into the workforce. And it's been like this for forever. I mean, the boomers, about 20% of them are still in the workforce. So there'll be a time where maybe that shifts. But when you start to think about it from the perspective of, okay, these were my earlier experiences, right? Within my household, within my friend group, now in my workspaces that I've been in, these are the dynamics that I've seen. These are the paradigms, right? The piece that we're going to go into next is really understanding, well, how much of that is still showing up for you, or how much of, or other people's paradigms are you still living out? And at what point can you, or do you want to choose the paradigm that you want to have, or the relationship that you want to have with power? Tapping, or EFT, and we'll walk through the process of what that looks like. It's really meant to help support you in releasing any emotions that you may have stored. So we've been asking you to share some of the emotions. There's a reason behind that. And whether we realize it or not, we often internalize messages or emotions around power, and we've stored them. And so these emotions, when we feel them, they're energy, right? So they get stuck in our body when they get stored. And oftentimes we don't even realize that they're stuck in our bodies, and they'll start to show up different ways. So to help facilitate the release of some of those emotions, we're going to go through this process and release some empowerment energy. And so tapping, again, it's EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and you can look that up. There are specific points that are acupuncture points that when we tap with our fingers, and I'll show you how to do that, it creates like this physical switch that turns down the fight or flight, right? So our nervous system, it just turns it down so that we can let the emotions that have bubbled up actually go. And if you've never heard this before, if you've never done emotions work, we're only supposed to feel an emotion for 90 seconds. That's it. So when we get mad, when we're happy, when we're joyful, whatever it is, it's only supposed to be for 90 seconds. But sometimes, right, especially if we had that parent who's like, no, or we had the bullying, we didn't know that. And so today we get to release some of that if it's come up for you. And so the approach here, I'm going to walk you through what we're going to do, but it's going to be, you're going to repeat after me some of these messages as we tap on the points. And while we're doing that, you're going to have your cameras off, and you're just going to repeat after me and really just feel into your own body and figure out what feels good to you, what makes sense to you, and continue to move down that path. And so basically, we're going to start from the top of the head, and we're going to tap. And so when I say tap, if you can see these two fingers, your index finger and your middle finger, you're going to find the places and you're going to tap with that. You can also use 3 fingers, but just start with 2 fingers. And again, fill it out to see what feels good for you. And I want you to notice the places in your body. So if I'm tapping on the top of the head, but you really want to stay in the collarbone area, that's completely fine as well. Just know that there's no magic to how many times you tap. So it doesn't have to be like 5 on each. It's really just the more that you tap in those places, it's calming that fight or flight stress response. So, again, it may not feel like anything's happened, but trust and believe something is happening. So let's begin. I want you to follow after me as I move through these spots, these tapping places, if you will, with my fingers. And I just want you to just move through. We're going to do from the top of the head down. I picked the ones that you can see on Zoom here. And obviously you have the image so that you can follow along just in case you're not quite sure where it is that I'm talking. So when we start with the top of the head, I chose to wear a bun today of all days. But nonetheless, you find the crown of your head and you tap there with your 2 fingers. So get a feel for that. Next, we're going to move to the eyebrow point. So that's, right where the bone is on the side of your eyebrows. And you'll tap there on both eyes, or you can do just one if that feels better. Then we go to the side or under the eye, like right where the bone is. And you can also do the side of the eye, like right where your shadow ends if you're wearing shadow. And then next is the top of the lip. So right where you have that little dent. Here I'll do 1 finger just because there's only space for 1 finger. And then the next one is right underneath your bottom lip on the chin. Go through the chin. Next are your collarbone. So actually not on the collarbone, but right underneath the collarbone. You tap there and you can like move, in and out. And then the next one is under your arm. So right where like your bra strap is, you tap there. And then the last one is the side of the hand. So if you can see, side karate chop right there. And cool trick, you can use this if you're in a meeting and you're having that moment and you're feeling frustrated. You can put your hands under the desk and you can do this and it'll still help you release that. And so you're going to follow along with me. I'm going to say something, right? And then you're going to repeat it on your own. The other thing that I'm going to say before we start this is, sometimes some of this can be really, really triggering. So it can create some really, really strong emotions. I don't want you to continue and push through. Just pause, just stop. Stop repeating after me and maybe just continue to tap. And if that feels like too much, just stop. You can either put your feet on the ground to ground yourself, or you get up and you walk away to release some of that energy. So we want to make sure that this is, a safe experience for you. So lean into your body. And if it feels like too much, it's okay for you to stop. Even if you, don't want to mouth the words, you can keep doing it. But, stay tuned into your body. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. First, I'd like you to take just 3 deep breaths. So you'll close your eyes. 1, 2, and 3. All right, now that you're centered, I want you to go into the chat before we get into this. And I just want you to put right now on a scale from 1 to 10, how powerful do you feel? So 1 being powerless, 10 being powerful. So on a scale of 1 to 10, real quick, just so that we could get into the meat of this. All right, now I'm going to have you repeat after me as we go through these tapping points. All right, so close your eyes, deep breath, yet again. I'm really feeling it. I am feeling it. I feel the tension in my stomach. I feel the trembling in my voice. I feel the frustration. Oh, it's so frustrating. I hate feeling so controlled. This is suffocating. And I just can't take it anymore. The discomfort the unnerving. I feel so unstable. I just hate being asserted upon. I hate having to put others' needs above my own. This feels so disempowering. Ugh. This is exhausting. I'm tired of being the cheerleader. I am so over accommodating everyone else. What about my needs? I'm coping the best I can. But what if it gets worse? I want you to pause and take a deep breath. Then we're going to start again. Eyes closed. You start tapping in whatever point feels good to you. So I'm going to start at the top of my head. I'm so tired of the bullying and the disregard for my opinion. I am over accommodating everyone else. I'm tired of feeling controlled. I want my voice to be heard. I want my voice to be heard. I don't want to be the nice girl. I'm tired of being the nice girl. This isn't disempowering, and I'm over it. And the truth is, I just feel betrayed. Like I've betrayed myself. I feel betrayed by my family. I feel betrayed by my friends. I feel betrayed by my coworkers, my leadership. It's just too much. Take a deep breath. And now I want you to pause. You can keep tapping. Keep your eyes closed. Just tap on the places that feel good to you. I just want to do a quick check-in, right? You don't have to, if you're still tapping, you don't have to stop and put it in the chat. But what's going on inside for you right now? On a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is it? And then also notice, where do you feel it in your body? On a scale of 1 to 10, again, you don't have to share it, but I want you to take notice where these emotions are showing up for you. Okay. Deep breath. We're just going to do one other round of tapping to close this out. Well, it feels a little better, but the truth is, I still feel disempowered. The truth is, I'm still tired of not having my needs met. The truth is, I still feel so unstable. The truth is, it's still unnerving. It's still so disempowering. And most of all, it's exhausting. It is exhausting. What if it gets worse? What if I continue to feel disempowered? What if I never have my voice heard? I never feel stable. What if? Ugh, it's too much. It's too much. And I don't want to feel any of this anymore. I don't want to feel any of this anymore. It's too much. It's overwhelming. And I'm over it. All right, now stop. I want you to take a deep breath. And again, quick check-in on a scale of 1 to 10. What's going on inside? And how intense is it? Just your own personal check-in. In the beginning, as I shared the past, right, a lot of our paradigms around power, around authority, and everything else, they were given to us. They were literally given to us by our parents, our caretakers, our siblings, our friends, school teachers, you name it. And then when we got into corporate America, when we got into our workspaces, there were the paradigms based on the structure of the environments that we're in. And so now that we've released some of those emotions, we get to establish a layer, if you will, that's based on what it is that we want. And so this is going to be very like, I want you to think about, if you ask like a 4-year-old, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, I want to be an astronaut, right? You have no limits to their imagination. And so just for a moment, I want us to act like 4-year-olds who are just excited about life. They have not paid a bill yet. And they know their toys, they know their friends, and they know that they're loved for the most part, right? And so let's just take a moment and channel that inner child within us and pause and reflect. And, what would life look like if, we wake up tomorrow and there were no barriers? There were no social norms holding us back, that, we didn't have any personal insecurities clouding our judgment. We weren't comparing ourselves to the next person. There weren't any limitations on our ability to climb up the ladder or to lead a movement, whatever it was. No limits, no limits. And so just for a second, if you would entertain me, I just want you to close your eyes and I just want you to visualize if there were absolutely no barriers, if I could wave this magic wand, what would that look like for you when you were able to freely express yourself, your ideas, voice, your voice carried weight, right? Because you knew that because you're at the table, that there was value. What would that look like? Envision a world where, power is not wielded as a weapon, but like someone said, that there's shared power. We're all working towards a big picture to support everybody. And each piece of the puzzle is worthy, is valued, has a voice. What would that look like? What would that feel like? How would that change how you feel about yourself? How you feel about the space that you take up? Be it at work, be it in your home life, your personal relationship. How would you step into your power? How would your values show up? Which values would show up? As we allow ourselves to go back to that bright-eyed, happy, bill-free, carefree little girl, right? We can bring her into the present. As we bring her into the present, how powerful is she? How effective is she? How much of a change agent is she? Because she knows there's no limits. So again, we're going to go through this. I'm just putting this up so that you remember where the tapping points are. And again, you find the places that work for you. We're just going to go through this for a few minutes. We're going to do what I call a couple rounds through this process. But before we get started, I just want you to take a deep breath. Maybe one more. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Okay. And then again, I just want you to lean into your own body and do a check-in. What emotions are showing up? Where do you feel them? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is that feeling? And depending on where you feel them, if there's a tapping point that I've showed you that is near, you can leverage that. And so I'm going to have you repeat after me again, as we did earlier, as we go through the tapping points. Again, I'm going to start with the top of the head and move around. Feel free to pick what works best for you. As I come into my body and my emotions, I feel more centered and I feel more clear. When I come out of feeling frustrated and boxed in and angry, I get to let go of some of those painful feelings. It feels so good to let go of some of those feelings. The ones I didn't even know I was still holding on to. It feels good to let go. It feels calming to let go. It feels freeing to let go. It feels powerful to let go. And now that I've let go, I get to be centered. I get to be brilliant. I get to be in the flow. I get to be clear. I get to be focused. I get to be powerful. My boundaries are grounded. I am grounded. I am more steady and more ready. Pause. Take a deep breath. Okay, we're going to continue. I honor everything I have experienced up until this point. I honor who I have become. I honor my strength. I honor my resiliency. I honor my tenacity. I am strong. I am graceful. I am powerful. I am enough. My boundaries are honored. My voice and opinions are honored. My value is recognized and appreciated. what I give to the world, my family, my career, and my community is valued. I am important. I am fearless. I am a force. Starting today, I choose to feel. I choose to believe. And I choose to reclaim my power and stand in the truth that I insert your name. I reclaim my power. I stand in my truth. And I declare that I insert your name. I reclaim my power. I stand in my truth. And I declare, insert your name, am powerful. Pause and take a deep breath. Take 2 deep breaths. And so now we're in this place of we've tapped into our emotions, we've tapped into our power. We are feeling not just empowered, but powerful. And then we go back into the world, and the world is like, I'm sorry, what? Who are you? Where did this come from? Like, you left here, today feeling like or being this person, and now all of a sudden you're this. And so I didn't want you to leave, I didn't want your bubble to get burst too quickly, and just kind of wanted to create a little bit of a soft landing for that. And so it's just important to understand that whenever we step into our power, whether that's professionally or personally or whatever, we essentially are renegotiating any power commitments we made with other people. Right. And so while you may have had a breakthrough, or you've had, your sense of calming, whoever else is in your life, personal or professional, they weren't in on the session. And so they're expecting you to show up the same way that you've always showed up. So what tends to happen is when we've, made that one step forward, and, you hear the one step forward, 2 steps back, that's why you've moved into a new place. They haven't. And because of, just the dynamics, they want you to come back to where it is. So I just wanted you to be prepared and to understand that when you go back into work or whatever, and like someone says something and you're like, who are you talking to? Don't you know I'm powerful? They're not aware. And if there's resistance and there's pushback, it's part of the process. And so what I want you to understand is, please don't back down, right? Your friends, your family members, your colleagues, they may be a little bit challenging. They may be challenging to the new you, not because they don't want you to be empowered, but that might threaten their position of power in your life that they previously had, right? And it doesn't have to be like overbearing or anything like that. So don't back down. And, just because someone feels threatened by like your new level of empowerment, it doesn't mean that you have to stop your growth. All that we did today was crack part of an egg, right? Personal development, professional development, it's a lifelong journey. So you get to continue this growth path in whatever modality works best for you. We just gave you a tool that can help you do that. And so when it comes to renegotiating your power, just a couple things I want you to be mindful of. It means, and we've heard this word, right? Boundaries. You're going to have to set clear boundaries, and not just set them, reinforce them, right? So you set the boundary, you communicate the boundary, and when the boundary is pushed up against, you reinforce that by recommunicating it and re-level setting. If there's anything that you've done or said, right, that needs apology, right? Because personal development and growth is all about accountability on our own too. It's not always them. So is there anything that you need to apologize for? Redefine any prior commitments you've made that are no longer aligned. So if you didn't have boundaries in place and now you go to set boundaries, what do we need to realign? What do we really need to renegotiate here? And then set a new schedule, a new habit, a new routine. And I entered this piece because this is something that you're going to have to continue to do. You're going to have to continue to focus on, leaning into your emotions. You're going to have to continue to focus on identifying when someone triggers you, whether it's a happy trigger or a not so happy trigger. So this is work that you're going to have to figure out. When do I want to schedule this? When do I want to do it? Like, will I start yoga? Will I continue doing EFT? Whatever that looks like for you, this is something that I encourage you to continue. It's also going to mean that at some point you may have to cut some people off. And I know that that's the hardest thing for us to do at times because we want to love everyone. We've been conditioned to love everyone, right? And so the thought of cutting people off, sometimes that feels uncomfortable. But if it's no longer serving who you are, who you're becoming, you get to make that choice to say, okay, is this person going to support the new version of me, or are they going to try to pull me back to the old person? And so we have a series of questions in the handout